Hello and welcome to Airheads, a not-so-serious look at the serious business of royal rumours, gossip and gowns. I'm Tom.
And I'm Maeve.
And this week we've had Will and Kate on the brain all week. But we do have another story to talk about first.
Yes, it was Tom's big birthday this week and he got a very special gift.
A telegram from the Queen.
An exclusive in the Telegraph. Boris Johnson will announce within weeks a new national flagship named after the Duke of Edinburgh that will be seen as a successor to the Royal Yacht Britannia.
Oh my god, this is just so incredibly embarrassing.
All of you out there who've been so missing the Yacht Britannia, finally we get a new ship expected to be named HMS Prince Philip, which the Telegraph claims will boost British trade and drive investment into the UK economy for the low price of £200 million.
Yeah, before it's done any of this investment driving, you have to shell out £200 million. It's ridiculous. But senior government sources have said it could promote British business overseas by mooring near international trade fairs, hosting high-level trade negotiations and sailing all over the world promoting UK interests.
It could also play an important role promoting foreign policy and security objectives, including by hosting summits and other diplomatic talks.
So basically it's just going to be used for schmoozing with MBS. But don't let that play on your conscience too much, because it could be fitted with the latest green technology.
It certainly could.
So that makes me feel a lot better about it.
We'll have to wait and see. It may also be used to host members of the royal family on overseas visits, which I think is going to be the main point of interest for a lot of royal watchers. And I think we know what that means, Tom.
Yeah. Will and Kate are about to go on a lot of sailing holidays.
Tours,
yes. No, you're right. I mean, this is so embarrassing for me as a British person, like, to see my government deciding that this is a good thing to do, important thing to do.
A worthwhile expense.
Yeah.
Right now.
In a fucking pandemic, they're like, we've got 200 million to spend on a yacht.
Purely as a government tribute to Prince Philip. As if people are clamouring for expensive tributes to this man.
Yeah, but we should move on from that because I can feel my blood pressure spiking. And on to the main event of this week.
It was the 10th anniversary of the royal wedding of Prince William and Kate Middleton. Catherine, Duchess of Cambridge. They delivered a multimedia assault via their social media channels. We got 2 new pictures taken in the grounds of Kensington Palace this week by Chris Floyd, who's a rock photographer, according to the Daily Mail, best known for his Britpop portraits in the 1990s.
Oh, cool Britannia. Kind
of interesting they went with him and not Chris Jackson, their regular guy, but
these guys
wouldn't have noticed much of a difference, to be perfectly honest with you.
Well, these guys are the rock stars of the royal family, and they deserve to be captured as such. And didn't they look like rock and rollers in these photos?
Did they? So we got 2 pictures. One was a reenactment of their engagement portrait where they're sort of hugging and nestling into each other, which was smart of them because it ensured all the papers would run side-by-side shots on the front pages, and they duly did so. The other one was a sort of spooning cuddle. Is that how you describe it, Tom?
That's exactly how I describe it, yeah.
You know, I think these 2 pictures are the most PDA we've seen from Will and Kate in literally years.
Yeah, absolutely. We've, in fact, seen them, like, almost do the opposite of this in recent years. So it was very interesting that they chose to be all lovey-dovey.
I really felt like these pictures were... like, Kate had picked these pictures because Kate looks amazing in them. Will, less so.
Oh, man. He looks really bad.
We will talk a little bit about what Kate's wearing and stuff later on, but I was really struck because obviously they were reenacting the engagement portrait of 11 years ago. The difference that, you know, Kate obviously looks, I would say, even better now than she did then. Will, a dramatic decline.
I know, and I do find, obviously, his baldness is a big part of that. But, like, we're not just being like, oh, he's bald so he looks worse. Like, there was a period of time, was it a couple of years ago, where he, like, got a really short haircut. Like, basically shaved his head. And he looked so much better. But, like, because he has it at that, like, length that he has it, it's very Mr. Burns.
No.
And I'm sorry, he sort of looked more like her godfather or something in these photos.
No. Oh, God. But in addition to these photos, we also got a cinematic short film, would you call it, maybe?
For your consideration.
Of the Cambridges, the perfect British family.
They are, yeah. And we don't know where exactly the video was filmed.
I'm pretty confident it was in Norfolk because they're wearing the exact same outfits from their Christmas card last year, which was taken in Norfolk.
I was trying to look at different beaches because my theory...
Got way too deep into this, Tom. Nobody cares.
I thought they might have been in the Scilly Isles when they went for a half-term holiday in October last year.
Okay.
But both Norfolk and Scilly Isles have those kind of like beaches that are bordered by like the rushes and stuff with the white sand. So yeah, it could have been either.
It was definitely last year though, because we saw Lupo, who is very sadly no longer with us. He died in November last year. So I thought it was quite interesting that they had this taken nearly 6 months ago.
At least, yeah, 6 months ago.
And it really struck me as like a sort of glossy commercial almost, or like a campaign for like a barber or like Hunter Wellies or one of those posh outdoorsy brands.
Definitely. I felt like Kate was truly living her Enid Blyton fantasy, and that it was literally the famous five of them plus dog wrapped up in these clothes, clambering over the dunes and through the rushes.
With the music as well.
I mean, it was a lot glossier than any Enid Blyton.
Yeah, but that's what stood out to me, because it seemed like it was meant to be a sort of relatable, cozy, middle-class family holiday. But then the way that it was rendered on film suggested a very luxurious brand.
No, you're right. And I do think that it like mixes this message of the relatable and the luxurious. And it's like, are they just like us, or are they totally unattainable? And this film doesn't help me answer that question.
But Tom, perhaps that was the objective of the filmmaker. Will Warr, was that his name?
Yeah.
Maybe he was including a sort of subtle commentary on this performance of middle-class relatability.
I really hope so. I didn't see any evidence of that in his previous work for Tesco.
Well, very different brands.
That's true.
Lainey Gossip had an interesting read on this, where she likened it to a political campaign ad, which is very different in America to what we have in the UK. But she pointed out that those typically include warm family scenes that are meant to show that the candidate is a family-focused person, and that although Will and Kate aren't running for office, they will hold office. So they do have to sort of campaign like this to maintain relevance.
That's so interesting. It makes a lot of sense to put it in that kind of lens, and like all the toasting of marshmallows and stuff is literally warm family moments.
I think people generally liked it. It felt very dark and moody to me for like a cozy family thing. I thought it was so different from all the other social media stuff they've done before. Like, I don't think we talked about it on the podcast, but the egg smash video they did for Easter.
Yeah.
Which looked like somebody just had to knock it up in 5 minutes.
Yeah, it seemed so last minute and looked like utterly pants. And it makes me think that they spent their whole budget on this Famous Five cosplay. It did remind me of, we got that clip of Harry and Meghan and Archie and their dogs on the beach during the Oprah interview. Obviously that was shot in black and white. This isn't quite done in black and white, but like you said, it's still very dark and moody, which is probably actually just a result of the British summer holiday. But It's an interesting kind of parallel that we've kind of got these like beach scenes, and I think a lot of people would say that Harry and Meghan are a lot further along in solidifying their brand visually in that kind of like consistent way. So do you think that the Cambridges are looking to extend this kind of filmmaking or this kind of glossy veneer they've put on their family life as something that's going to be on more stuff in the future?
Yeah, well, we've seen in the last year that they've used social media so much more to communicate. And, you know, obviously through Instagram, that means images and videos. So I think this is probably a sign that they are looking to have a much more high production value stab at this than the shitty Easter egg video.
Yeah, I mean, especially after the last year when they haven't been able to do stuff in person, they've probably really come to see like what the value is of having a good video or a good photo in a way that, you know, maybe didn't seem as important to them before.
I really didn't like it though.
To
put a cap on that, I thought it was way too polished and like a weird movie trailer for their life.
Yeah, no, I get that. Like, I thought it was really well put together, which doesn't mean that I like that style or that I think it's particularly like apt for them. But I am kind of intrigued to see what the next installment of this movie is, though. So, you know, I guess
we await the sequel. You did mention Harry and Meghan, though. Thought I would point out that they let us know that they wished Will and Kate a happy anniversary privately.
And apparently it's unclear whether the message was sent via a phone call, video call, or written note.
We've said this before when they like wish people happy birthday privately. I always say privately with fucking 10 sets of inverted commas there because there's nothing private about sending a press release to People magazine and Harper's Bazaar and whoever else to be like, oh, we privately congratulated them on their anniversary.
Yeah.
And I, again, wish they wouldn't do this, but I guess they feel like this is them having the upper hand or showing they're a bigger person. Yeah,
and I suppose knowing that if they don't say something every time one of these events comes around, then there'll be a whole load of articles about how did the Sussexes snub X on the day.
I hadn't even expected to hear that kind of thing with this anniversary, though. Anyway, we know this is their custom now.
But it wasn't all just giving us photos and videos and light-hearted celebration of the perfect British family life. There was some really important work being done this week by Will and Kate.
Just Will, I think. Certainly just Will on the tweet, anyway.
Yeah.
This tweet posted by Kensington Palace Twitter account on Friday. As president of the FA, Football Association, I joined the entire football community in the social media boycott this weekend. W.
And you know it's about football if he puts his initial at the end. Because he only ever fucking
we should actually look back through this because I only remember it being football-related tweets that he signs himself.
I hate it so much.
So Will and Kate joined a 4-day nationwide boycott of social media over online racism and abuse linked to sport. And this boycott aimed to persuade tech firms to take a stronger stance against racist and sexist abuse online. I rolled my eyes hard at this news.
Oh, totally. And I mean, I was definitely thinking, surely, like, no one would notice if they took 4 days off social media. Like, they're not that prolific that you would feel yourself, like, lacking. But we'd actually be wrong in this case because they had planned to share photos of Princess Charlotte on Saturday or Sunday to mark her birthday.
So they unfortunately had to completely abandon those plans and they were forced to just release them to every news outlet in the country and publish them on the front page the old-fashioned way.
And you're still able to find them online, just not through Instagram. I'd been wondering if this was the kind of move that would help their relationship with the Sussexes, or at least his relationship with Harry. I mean, I think you'd probably agree with me that white people with massive platforms deciding that the best way for them to address racism is by saying nothing seems like a really fucking stupid idea. But it's possibly the kind of idea that Harry would think is cool.
Yeah, or definitely any kind of campaign that's like trying to target tech firms, I feel like Harry could get on board with.
Yeah. So I wonder if that's brought them a bit close together. We'll never know. But what we can do is go back into the mists of time. Back 10 years to that wedding.
We watched Kate and Will's wedding for the first time this week. I'd only seen clips of it before. Can you believe it was 3.5 hours long?
I know. I can see now why I'd only seen clips before. We had to split it up over 3 days.
Yeah, and we skipped most of the actual ceremony because it was very boring.
And a lot of the riding around in carriages, which you can only watch so much of.
But I think, like, one of the big impressions I had from this was, like, so obvious, but it was just so big. Like, you knew, of course, that it was a massive event, but seeing the scale of it across the city was pretty mind-blowing, honestly.
Yeah, and just the, like, rows and rows and rows of people lined up all around, like, Westminster, just waiting for a tiny glimpse of them. My thoughts were, it seemed like a lot less fun than when we went to Harry and Meghan's wedding, and we were, like, having a little picnic on the long walk.
Yeah, well, obviously it's different in Windsor when there's a lot more greenery and you're in a park compared to sort of being stuck behind a barrier on a road in like a square in London. But as well as that, I think it actually made Harry and Meghan's wedding look like quite a small wedding in comparison.
Yeah, like a sort of boutique affair. Yeah.
But, you know, we're not going to be comparing it to Harry and Meghan the whole time, but I think one of the things that really was noticeable was how different the crowd was in Westminster Abbey and how many politicians were there.
Yeah, you had David Cameron, Nick Clegg, George Osborne, Theresa May, and John Major. And I'm sure there were so many other political people that I don't recognise who were there.
So many lingering shots on, like, Nick Clegg, who nobody talks about anymore. But I was surprised as well by, you know, I wouldn't have thought 10 years ago was that long ago, but seeing how dated some of the outfits were.
Yeah.
And how some of the outfits seemed a lot less formal than at Harry and Meghan's wedding. Like, I was really surprised that Samantha Cameron, David Cameron's wife, wasn't wearing a hat.
Yeah, well, you would have sent her home to change.
Well, I thought you had to wear a hat and you had to wear a hem that went below the knee and covered shoulders or covered upper arms, and she had on like a little cap sleeve, which seemed not inappropriate to me. That seems like such a prescriptive thing to say, but I was surprised.
Yeah, so was I, especially in comparison to like all the other outfits, that so many massive hats.
And watching people arrive was a lot less fun than at Harry and Meghan's wedding, or even like Eugenie's wedding, because there were way less celebrities. It was basically like the Beckhams and Elton John, and that was it. And also, every shot of the crowd, it was like, wow, look how many white people are at this wedding.
Yeah.
This is possibly the whitest wedding ever on earth, apart from that one section where they put all the black and brown people together.
Yeah, it was very noticeable.
Also very noticeable, the trees.
Yeah, some of the greenery and stuff they had in the Abbey looked really good. Like, I thought the stuff they had behind the altar, like coming over the top of that kind of screen, looked really nice. But just the trees that were lining it, I could tell maybe what they thought it would look like, but it just came across as quite weird, I thought.
I think it must be so daunting trying to figure out how to decorate such an enormous space, and like what would you even do with flowers there without doing something that would be absolutely enormously wasteful. I imagine like these trees could probably be like replanted elsewhere or something, so maybe it's like a more sustainable way of doing it. I probably should have looked this up. But it just seemed really remarkable, these trees all along the aisle.
I sort of feel like no one cared about sustainability in 2010, so I'm sure.
Prince Charles did, I'm sure.
Oh, yeah, that's true.
He was there, obviously, with Camilla in a huge sort of sombrero-style hat.
She looked amazing. She looked like a swashbuckling pirate captain.
Speaking of hats, verdict on Princess Beatrice and Princess Eugenie's hats?
I just think they get better every time I look at them.
Yeah,
like, I'm more into them now.
I can't believe people were such dicks about those hats.
Yeah.
And I have such fond feelings for them, and I love that they wore them.
Yeah. And I felt like really happy seeing the kind of boring men sitting behind them who like wouldn't be able to see past them. I was like, yeah, that's good. I like that.
Obviously didn't love that Andrew was front and centre.
Yeah.
But it was interesting being reminded that Fergie wasn't invited.
Yeah, I had totally forgotten that, and it made her like kind of lap of honour that she did at Harry and Meghan's wedding like all the better.
Carol Middleton with a very clean-shaven James Middleton.
Yes, he was very clean-shaven, surprisingly clean-shaven. But her outfit was very pale.
Suspiciously pale, Tom. You had a lot of concerns about what a light grey she was wearing.
Almost like she was the bride.
The Queen, though, was absolutely beaming.
Yeah.
Oh my god, I didn't remember that from the photos.
I think the closest I've seen to her looking like that in recent years is that photo of her meeting Archie with Doria. Like, I think she does look really happy in that photo.
I think you're going to say the photos of her with horses.
Yeah, maybe, but they don't really stick in my mind as much. I suppose she looked really happy on that Zoom she did the other week. Certainly, I guess what we're saying is she didn't look that happy at Harry and Meghan's wedding.
Yeah, I couldn't get over it. She looked delighted throughout. Like, I mean, there was a little bit towards the end where she seemed to be looking through the programme like, okay, how long is this going to go on for? But otherwise, delighted throughout.
And really chatty with everyone.
Harry and Will were among the first members of the family to arrive. Harry looking so young.
Yeah, another man who was very clean-shaven and maybe ill-advisedly.
Beards work magic on some men. Kind of dishevelled looking as well, I thought he was.
Yeah, his like scruffy schoolboy hair.
Not a good look, honestly.
No, he looks so much better now. And I mean, I guess it is like interesting because we've been looking over this like decade, seeing like who's had a glow up and who's kind of looking
had a glow down.
Yeah.
Will was already losing his hair at this point.
Mm.
And I feel like around this time was when a lot of guys were getting hair transplants. Like, this would have been around Wayne Rooney time, right?
Yeah, and he loves football.
Couldn't get over Will's smirk.
Yeah, I couldn't tell if it was a really nervous smile, but then I feel like we've seen him do this smirk in so many situations now that I think it just is, like, how he smiles.
I wonder, though, is this the kind of sort of cheeky smile that lots of people would have found very endearing, but to me just reads as kind of belligerent?
Yeah, and kind of patronising as well sometimes.
Kate, though. The whole journey to the cathedral was fascinating to me. Watching her go through this like huge white tented structure so no one could see the dress as she was getting into the car. That was great. Accompanied by her dad, Michael Middleton. I felt quite nervous as she was getting out of the car. Like, the whole way she looked so calm and she was smiling and waving at everyone. But as she was getting out of the car, obviously I knew like the dress was fine, but she was so poised. She looked very happy, smiling the whole time, waving. Didn't seem nervous at all, even when the veil was kind of clinging to her lipstick.
Yeah.
She had to pull it away from her face.
I mean, like, throughout the whole of this 3-hour spectacle, like, that dress is impossible. Like, it's so unwieldy, given the amount of, like, walking and climbing in and out of stuff she had to do. I thought she handled it so well. Very awkward situation to be in, and she did a really good job.
Yeah, and I think I've said it before, like 100 times on this podcast, that I love that dress and think it's perfect, so timeless, so beautiful. I think we've talked before as well about how we wonder what Lee McQueen would have thought of his house going on the year after his death to make a dress for a member of the royal family.
Yeah.
And how at odds that seems to me with the previous iteration of Alexander McQueen before Sarah Burton joined the brand. But, you know, it did give a boost to the brand. Very noticeable how heavy Kate's makeup was.
Yeah.
That she supposedly did herself.
She did so much of it herself.
That was just another indication of how much time has passed. Like,
Yeah.
I presume at the time that would have not really struck people. But looking back, it's like such heavy eyeliner, the fake tan. I thought the blush was lovely. I know you thought it was a little bit much.
I thought it was too much. I thought it kind of radiated through the veil, which maybe is a good thing. I don't know, but...
Also, Pippa Middleton's tan and non-existent bum. I remember at the time being like, this is bullshit, when people were losing their minds over her backside in that fucking dress. Nothing to look at there.
And it's not just contained to 10 years ago. I was brought into this conversation I did not want to be in work, like 2 years ago, with a colleague who was saying, Pippa Middleton's ass, though.
Oh no!
Yeah, seriously. And I didn't know where to look.
And you were saying, I'm more of a Kim Kardashian ass man. I'm sure. One of our listeners asked, did Harry and Pippa hook up that night? Tom, thoughts?
Oh, absolutely.
You think they did?
No.
I don't think they did.
No, I think it was like total collective fantasy from people who were like, those are two unmarried young people.
Total fan fiction, yeah. And like watching it, I was thinking of the Royal We, the Jessica Morgan and Heather Cox book. But yeah, so when Kate arrives and she's walking up the aisle, Will is facing studiously ahead. He doesn't look behind, but Harry is next to him, obviously, and looks over his shoulder and sort of reports back. I thought that was a cute moment.
Yeah.
Where he's like smiling. And then Kate and her dad reaching the altar and having that really weird bit where Michael Middleton passes Kate's hand to Will via the Archbishop.
That was so weird. Like,
I don't know if that's standard procedure.
I've never seen that before in anything. And like,
I hated it.
Yeah, I absolutely hated it. And the way it was just, I don't know, it seemed like both really natural and really unnatural. Like, they didn't think it was weird, but it was also such a weird thing to do.
It was theatre. You were very into the Archbishop of Canterbury.
Oh yeah, I thought it was great to see him with his like mad eyebrows and beard.
This was the previous one, not the one who's currently in the job.
Yeah, I thought he looked good in his big tall hat.
Yeah, I think the one moment when Kate did seem quite nervous was when they had to make their vows and she was so quiet you could barely hear her.
Yeah.
Which, who can fucking blame her? The whole time I was like, how is she doing this? How does she not look like she wants to get sick all over herself and die?
Absolutely, because we also watched the engagement video that they did.
The interview.
Yeah, and Kate seemed so nervous in that.
Oh my god, I feel like I had tears in my eyes watching that. I felt so much for her. She was like trembling. I'm sure you guys have all seen it. But just looked absolutely terrified. Yeah. As you would be.
And like being asked so many questions about like her family and what it feels like to be like, what it feels like for people to think she doesn't do any work and stuff. Like all the stuff that I kind of would like to ask her about, but seemed kind of a lot for an engagement interview.
Yeah, well, I guess Tom Bradby knew that was the only time anyone would ever ask her questions like that. As I was watching it, I was like, wow, nobody would ever be allowed to ask something like this now. Yeah. Which is bullshit, but...
Yeah, exactly.
You know. I thought it was quite nice in that interview how when she would be sort of looking to Will, panicked, like, help me, that he would step in, and he was obviously much more comfortable in that situation, and that he could kind of answer the questions that were stumping her.
Yeah, and just kind of move the interview on to the next bit. And, like, I am not a fan of that kind of man or straight man humour of, like, I tried to do some cooking just to impress my bird, and then, you know, now I don't even fucking bother anymore. Like, I find that really disappointing whenever you hear it from anyone. And I thought Will did a lot of that and a lot of jokes and asides, which I didn't like and would make me in Kate's position be like, oh God, what have I done? But that was a nice thing that he did in terms of kind of rescuing her from these questions.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I was still definitely saying to you, like, every 5 seconds, don't do it. Why did she do it?
Yeah.
Another thing I came across was that Meghan Markle wrote about this wedding on The Tig.
Oh, my God. So perfect.
Her now defunct lifestyle blog, for anyone unfamiliar, she wrote, "Little girls dream of being princesses. I, for one, was all about She-Ra, Princess of Power. For those of you unfamiliar with the 80s cartoon reference, She-Ra is the twin sister of He-Man and a sword-wielding royal rebel known for her strength. We're definitely not talking about Cinderella here." Such a Megan line. "Grown women seem to retain this childhood fantasy. Just look at the pomp and circumstance surrounding the royal wedding and endless conversation about Princess Kate."
I can't believe, actually, when you found this, I was like, we actually get Megan's unfiltered thoughts on a royal wedding.
I know, I saw this in Hello magazine. I think they reported it like pretty recently. It might have been in the last year.
Wow.
And I just couldn't believe that we didn't hear more about this around the time of her wedding.
Amazing. But we've had a look back over this 10-year marriage, and we wanted to go through each year of that marriage and kind of talk about the highlights and lowlights. So,
or just like stupid funny things that we would have talked about if we were doing a podcast at that point.
Yeah, I mean, what I consider to be the highlights. So some other things did happen in 2011 other than the wedding. Mm-hmm. We had Will and Kate meeting the Obamas during their visit to the UK.
Big moment. Also, the Cambridges going on their tour to North America, which included stops in Los Angeles where they attended a Hollywood BAFTA dinner with Barbara Streisand, Tom Hanks, J-Lo, Nicole Kidman and Stephen Fry, who said, "If you brought back Clark Gable and Marilyn Monroe to life, you could not have had more excitement."
What a fucking liar. He's full of shit.
But if that's the kind of frenzy that he was trying to capture in the room, like if that's what he was trying to express, I thought that was very telling. And they also visited Canada, where they went on a trip to the rodeo and wore those great cowboy hats. We had those amazing pictures of them in the cowboy hats. They were so funny. But another big thing from this tour, and something that kind of plagued Kate for many years, were what people have described as her Marilyn moments, where her skirts would fly up in the wind.
Yeah, these really awkward photos from Calgary Airport. They flew in and they had a photo with all these soldiers, and Will is obviously there as well. He's in a suit.
She's in that like yellow mini dress.
Yeah, and like everyone's just standing there looking at the camera, and she's like holding her dress down, and it's like so awkward. And I'm like, nobody is helping. Nobody has said, why don't we do this photo inside?
Yeah.
Like, it's actually, I found it really creepy and kind of sinister to look at, and I really felt for her.
Yeah, and I think, you know, this did happen many times, but after a certain point, it stopped happening, obviously, and I remember there being some kind of reports that the Queen may have suggested that she start putting hem weights in her skirts because one of the Queen's dressmakers, Stuart Parvin, had said that he used little lead curtain weights from John Lewis in all the Queen's hems to make sure that didn't happen.
But on to 2012.
Big year of the London Olympics. And before the Olympics, Kate went to meet Team GB and she wore those famous skinny jeans, the coral skinny jeans that people were going crazy trying to identify. They were from Zara. But I thought that was a real sort of, I was going to say a landmark moment, but I guess it was in royal fashion because, you know, royal skinny jeans and high street royal skinny jeans. And
she made them such like a signature of hers for years. Like you see
even
so
now,
many photos of her wearing skinny jeans. I thought they looked so new rave when I was looking at these photos. Made me wonder if she likes the klaxons.
She's probably more of an MGMT girl. But yeah, that was a real introduction to sporty Kate and how much of a big part of her brand that has become. Was very into the footage of Kate and Will watching the Olympics together, and again some very rare PDA with them publicly hugging each other. People are very excited about that.
The biggest story of 2012 though came in September when photos of Kate were published in the French magazine Closer. They had been taken with a high-powered long-distance lens of her sunbathing topless while on holiday at a family villa in France.
Yeah, we talked about these photos before. The Cambridges immediately got an injunction to stop them being reproduced elsewhere, and no British press published them. Will and Kate sued for invasion of privacy, but it took 5 years before they won the court case, and they received £91,000 in damages.
And they had asked for like 1.5 million, I think.
It's, yeah, shocking.
Yeah. So quite a disparity there. Like, obviously really gross behaviour. And St James Palace issued a statement at the time saying it was reminiscent of the worst excesses of the press and paparazzi during the life of Diana.
It's so sad.
Yeah.
It's terrible that happened to Kate. And, you know, it's even worse that then they went on this Diamond Jubilee tour, and that story basically overshadowed the whole tour, because that was the Queen's Diamond Jubilee year, and the royal family between them visited every Commonwealth country to celebrate the 60 years of the Queen's reign. But we did get some incredible videos of Kate hula dancing in Tuvalu, which is a Polynesian island country whose head of state is the Queen.
I actually thought that Kate's dancing in this video was kind of fab. Like, she looked like quite awkward and weird, but did look like she was having fun. And I was kind of obsessed with it a bit, but I thought Will looked so smug and just insufferable doing his version of the dance.
Yeah. And of course that was also the trip where there were the pictures of them being carried aloft on thrones. A real reminder that they were there to represent the force of British colonialism as it exists in the Commonwealth.
Yeah, and we shouldn't be distracted by the fact that Kate's hair looked really good because it was sort of more natural and relaxed because of the more humid air. So we should ignore that and focus on the fact that they are colonisers.
2013. As if poor Kate hadn't had a rough enough time with those photos. 2013, she was immortalised with a painted portrait by Paul Emsley, which was unveiled at the National Portrait Gallery. We've definitely talked about this portrait a few times.
It's awful.
It's so sinister, so unflattering.
And it's like possibly haunted as well, I think. The Guardian...
I think we've read this out before, but go, do it again.
This was at the time. The Guardian said, "The first thing that strikes you about Middleton's visage as it looms from the sepulchral gloom of her first official portrait is the dead eyes, a vampiric, malevolent glare beneath heavy lids. Then there's the mouth, tightly pursed, mean little lip clench she is presumably sucking in her fangs. And God knows what is going on with the washed-out cheeks. She appears to be nurturing a gobbet of gum in her lower right cheek. The hair is dull and lifeless. The glimpse of earrings simply lifts her to the status of Sloaney rather than merely proletarian undead."
Kate was obviously very polite about it, and supposedly she was full of praise, but, you know, as we've said before, we've been to the National Portrait Gallery several times and looked out for it. It is never on display.
Which I assume means they have it prominently displayed in Kensington Palace.
2013, though, was the birth of Prince George.
Yes, in the Lindo wing of the private hospital St Mary's.
The time leading up to the birth they called the Great Kate Wait, when photographers were posted up outside the hospital for 21 days.
It's crazy. And members of the public also spent hours camped outside around the time of the birth and then waiting for them to come out and leave the hospital.
The Sun had a live stream from outside the hospital for all the people that didn't want to go stand in the rain.
Yeah, I remember like people in my family watching that live stream and being like, "No, guys, they haven't come out yet." But George was born in the afternoon on the 22nd of June, and they left the hospital the following morning, and we got that famous photo on the steps, the one that Will and Kate have replicated with the births of Charlotte and Louis.
And we talked at the time about when Kate did the interview with the Happy Mum, Happy Baby podcast last year, and she talked about how she felt and how that she found the number of people outside kind of terrifying. but also that she wanted to get out of the hospital quickly because she associated it with how ill she'd been. So that kind of brought like a slightly different perspective on it.
Because I think you do obviously hear a lot about how Kate Middleton set a standard for women by doing these appearances so soon after giving birth. I mean, that's still very valid, but like it was interesting to get kind of
Kate's view.
Yeah, exactly. Also this year, Will retired from the RAF, and he started on a transitional year in which he was due to find out what his next role should be. So this was a year that included his first investiture ceremony, where the first medal that he ever pinned on someone immediately fell off. And he also then did a special agricultural course at Cambridge University to help prepare for running the Duchy of Cornwall one day. I mean, that still hasn't happened.
Yeah.
But they made up a special course for him, just for him.
Yeah, it was so interesting in kind of looking back at this decade at how the work-shy Will narrative developed. And I think 2014 was quite a big year for this because it started, well, in February with a pure disaster when Will was photographed on a hunting weekend in Spain days before launching a campaign against illegal wildlife trade.
Oh my god.
I think it might have actually been in the Sun literally the day before he launched this campaign. But I was reading this blog, hrhduchesskate.blogspot.com, and they had an interesting screenshot from the time, a tweet by Richard Palmer, the Express's royal editor, who said, "I think William is quite aggressive trying to control the media. Every now and again that will come back to bite him."
Yeah, it was really interesting reading all these takes on Will and Kate's actions, and Will's actions in particular, through the lens of the kind of privacy stuff that we hear so much about with regard to Harry and Meghan. And obviously Will and Kate have like come through that now, and they clearly have a very tight relationship with the press that they must have, I don't know, learnt from this period we're about to talk about, really, in terms of how to cultivate that relationship.
And in March, Kate and Will took a very controversial week-long luxury holiday in the Maldives. This was just after Will's shooting weekend in Spain, and also Kate had been on holiday in Mustique with the Middletons. As well as that, they had I can't remember if it's no or very few royal engagements since December. And they went on this luxury holiday without George. They left George with Nanny Maria. So they were faced with all this criticism of them being work-shy royals, plus also people questioning their parenting choices. And I was thinking, like, I just cannot imagine if Harry and Meghan, for instance, went on holiday and left Archie somewhere. Like, even when they came back to the UK and left Archie with Jessica Mulroney last year. Was that last year?
Yeah.
They were attacked for doing that, and that was for work.
And it was even, like, just after Archie was born, just Harry went to play in a charity polo match for, like, a day. It was really not for very long. And people were talking about his commitment as a father. So, yeah, interesting to see it applied to Will and Kate.
They were lucky, though, that later that year, they had the enormously successful tour of Australia and New Zealand, on which they were accompanied by little George.
Yeah, giving birth to George was worth it because he was able to play an absolute blinder on this tour.
There were so many funny pictures of George. I know lots of people love those pictures. My favourite was the bit when he threw away the stuffed toy he received at Taronga Zoo in Sydney.
Yeah, that's really good.
That's so funny, that clip.
I liked on this tour that Will and Kate, as well as doing the kind of like new parent cutesy bits, they also tried to be cool young people as well.
Will.
So Will tried his hand at graffiti.
Very cool.
Very, very cool. And when he was asked about his music taste, he said, "I like house music. I still like a bit of rock and roll and the classics and a bit of R&B. I'm not a big heavy metal fan. I'd like to be, but I'm not."
And they tried their hand at DJing.
This is amazing. If you watch the videos, they take turns scratching records. And
you know loads about DJing.
yeah, as you can tell from the way I talk about it, I'm a lot cooler than these people. But there's a good commentary by someone on the Australian TV who's remarking that Will has inherited his father's sense of rhythm. I thought was really good.
Also great photos from this tour of them playing cricket in Christchurch, where Kate is in that red skirt suit with the heels.
Yeah, playing cricket in heels, incredible. And Will throws the ball directly at her head at one point as well.
2015. Side note, 2015, the launch of Kensington Royal Twitter and Instagram.
Also the launch of Charlotte on the 2nd of May, once again at the Lindo Wing. I feel like I know the words Lindo Wing. They're burnt into my soul. I heard them so much over these years.
This was the year that Will started work as an air ambulance pilot in East Anglia, which was a job he later said he liked because he got to work as part of a team.
Which his other job doesn't necessarily do. I mean, I do feel like he could work as part of a team. He's not king yet. If he didn't have such a fragile ego, I think he'd have a easier time of it, maybe. But he said all that in a documentary that he let the BBC make about his time as an air ambulance pilot.
In September, one of the biggest royal moments for me, Charlotte's birth, whatever, Kate gets a fringe.
A very divisive fringe.
Huge moment. Longish fringe, sweeping to the side, sort of meant to look like it's growing out. But, as The Guardian noted at the time, this do is ultra high maintenance. Basically, and as luck would have it, you can't have a job with this longer line side fringe. Every time you bend your head, you end up with hair in your eyes getting greasier by the minute. You need a can of dry shampoo to hand at all times to have a fighting chance.
I mean, luckily for Kate, she does have that. She has people on hand at all times. And, I mean, this could have been some kind of attempt at relatability. I haven't had the chance to get my hair done, so my fringe is growing out because I'm a busy working parent. But, it's also very transparent when you try to do something when you are literally a duchess.
And, most importantly, I think it just didn't suit her, in my opinion.
Yeah.
I didn't think it suited her.
You wanted to bring back the sausage curls.
And she did, soon enough. I was interested to read about the Kensington Palace letter, the warning they made to paparazzi accusing photographers of harassing Prince George and using increasingly dangerous tactics to obtain covert images of him.
These tactics are wild. I totally missed this at the time, but apparently this included hiding in car boots and amongst sand dunes, and also using other children as bait to draw out what is described as their number one target into view.
It's awful. Jason Nauf, their communication secretary, said, "The worry is that it will not always be possible to quickly distinguish between someone taking photos and someone intending to do more immediate harm. The incidents are becoming more frequent and the tactics more alarming. A line has been crossed and any further escalation in tactics would represent a very real security risk." I do think they've clamped down on that now, though. We don't see paparazzi pictures of those kids unless they want us to.
Oh, yeah, no, absolutely. But I guess maybe what it took was basically them saying, we'll shoot you.
Yeah. No, I'm agreeing with you. I'm just saying, yeah. I think that sorted it out eventually.
Yeah. 2016, another tour. They went to India.
The India tour fascinates me because you had all these moments, like you had them playing cricket. They recreated the famous photo of Princess Diana at the Taj Mahal. There were those adorable pictures of them feeding the baby elephants and rhinos. But then as well, this tour faced a lot of criticism. I had mainly kind of heard about the criticisms of Kate's wardrobe, like the skirts flying up when she was laying the memorial wreath for Mahatma Gandhi, or that she would wear these sort of high street outfits that looked like sort of Indian style costumes, like that Topshop dress that she wore at one point. I mean, she did also wear that gorgeous Anita Dongre dress and pieces by local designers, but she kind of had a rocky go of it with that tour. And reading more broadly, the Royal Reporter's coverage of this tour was fascinating. How critical they were.
Like Emily Andrews really slated the tour in The Sun. She called it like a glorified holiday at the taxpayer's expense to the tune of £270,000, and that's not including the security costs. And she commented on the fact that Will was obsessed with having private moments to enjoy all the places that they went to, whilst, on public money at these public engagements they're being paid to do. And I do think this coverage just really shows how important it is for the royals to keep the reporters on side.
Yeah, one of the moments that a lot of the reporters mentioned and that Emily Andrews talks about was this very steep hike up to Tiger's Nest Monastery, where Will and Kate told the press halfway up the mountain they wouldn't be able to come with them all the way to the top. The monastery being the whole point of the trip, because they wanted some private time. And Tom Sykes wrote in the Daily Beast, to which one might have been tempted to reply, don't you get enough private time locked away in your vast country estate on the other 300 days of the year when you're not working? But when you don't keep them sweet, you get some details that they might otherwise have kept quiet. Like Emily Andrews points out that Kate brought her stylist Natasha Archer with her to touch up her hair and makeup before facing the cameras in the middle of this hike.
And I feel like if, they hadn't been kind of pissing off the reporters in this way, we wouldn't have found that out. It would have just been one of those details that doesn't make it into the story. But I did think that Emily Andrews kept a lot of her vitriol for Kate, because she talked so much about her banal comments. Like, one that really stood out to me that she mentioned was apparently when speaking to charity workers who help India's street kids who are mutilated in order to make more money begging, Kate said, gosh, so interesting.
Oh,
which is
Kate.
So bad. And Emily Andrews also kept going on about how she would never live up to Diana.
Brutal. Really brutal. She also really let them have it for their concerns over conservation. And she wrote, Will's and Kate's anger over a rhino being killed by poachers following their visit to a conservation park may well have come from the heart, but it would have concerned few of India's billion-strong population, many of whom face a daily struggle just to keep their own family alive.
Very valid criticism, both of the royals and of a lot of rich people who are far more comfortable talking about conserving wildlife than confronting the systems that produce absolutely devastating poverty all around the world, and those systems are the ones that benefit them the most. So I thought that was a good one to point out. But just the fact that this tour was treated in that way, I think it seemed like so much spurred on by this idea of Will and Kate wanting privacy, which is obviously something we've heard so much about over the recent years with Harry and Meghan. But I think you have to bear in mind this is quite complex, because I do think that Will and Kate should be able to have privacy when they're off in Anmer Hall or whatever, just living. That's very different from when they're on a public engagement. I feel like some of these articles were getting too angry about the lack of access.
Yeah, and I think that became an even bigger issue when they went to Canada later in the year and they brought George and Charlotte with them. And obviously the last time they brought George on the tour to Australia and New Zealand, it was a huge hit, so maybe they were kind of hoping he would work his magic again, but it didn't seem to happen. Tom Sykes wrote a piece for the Daily Beast where he talked about just how little buzz was generated by their arrival in Canada and how the palace had probably expected to be a big pictorial moment, but even the 24-hour news channels in the UK didn't carry a live feed when they arrived on the tarmac and met Justin Trudeau and Sophie Trudeau. And he was saying that the domestic and global public have lost a great deal of interest in Kate and William, and it's not hard to see why. They lead a life of almost obsessive reclusiveness at Anmer Hall in Norfolk. As such, they've become increasingly remote and unknowable figures, and even though they're funded with taxpayer money, they do shockingly few public duties in comparison to Queen Elizabeth and Prince Philip, and nobody's allowed to know what they're doing tucked away up there in Norfolk. So again, there was all this stuff about privacy. I think added to that, though, with Kate and Will, there is the question of them being work shy.
The thing is, how can you possibly do enough work to justify the amount of money and privilege they have?
I mean, you can't, but you can also try and look like you're working, which at one occasion when they were in Vancouver, they visited Sheway, a pregnancy outreach program, and Ron Abrams, a physician who works there, told Will that Princess Diana had opened the Women's Reproductive and Maternity Service in Glasgow in 1990, which Sheway had modelled itself on, and that was kind of one of the reasons for the visit, and had been briefed to journalists before the tour. But Will said, "Oh, I didn't know. That's good to hear. It's probably in my briefing notes somewhere. I've got this huge file of notes I haven't managed to get through yet, but I'll get there." Like, don't admit to that, man.
It's crazy, like, actually admitting not having done the work you're being paid to do.
So brazen.
And, like, this is a much worse, you know, for them than when you get Kensington Palace saying things like, supporting families affected by addiction is a major priority of the Duchess's work, talking about Kate. Like, I mean, that is obviously a lie, but it's one that's kind of hard to prove, and so people just let it slide. But this is, like, actually Will straight up admitting that he hasn't done his job.
Yeah, and I noticed as well that Victoria Murphy had written a piece in the Mirror about the challenges of royal parenting and how Will has this desire to be simultaneously ordinary and extraordinary. And she wrote that nothing demonstrates this conflict more than the fact that just a day before he brought his children out in front of the cameras, Torres and Victoria had been instructed to remove a tweet saying they had heard George and Charlotte had been to a petting zoo. Because it was seen as an invasion of their privacy. Right. And this trip was paid almost entirely by Canadian taxpayers. It was at least $1 million Canadian dollars. That's almost £600,000. But if anyone thought their money was going to buy them unfettered access to William Kate and their children for the duration of their stay, they were gravely mistaken, she writes. And it was just fascinating to me hearing how, because, you know, the sort of big photo moment from this tour, or certainly the one that has kind of had the most longevity, are the photos of Kay and Will bringing George and Charlotte to the petting zoo, and Charlotte with the dog, with the balloons, all that stuff. But she was pointing out that on the moments where they didn't have the kids with them, that they looked sort of like they were struggling to pay attention. And I mean, she kind of spun it to say that the fact they look bored is because they'd rather spend time with their family, and that's the thing that makes them most normal of all. And that's, you know, they're being relatable. They just want to be off duty like the rest of us. But, you know, they're paid by us, so it's slightly different.
But, like, you know, a lot of parents work, you know, and they do their job, and yeah, sure, they'd rather be with their kids, but they do the job and then they go to their kids, especially if they're like Will and Kate and they have like hot and cold running nannies.
The work-shy narrative I thought was very interesting, looking at it in 2016 in particular, and this was also the year when Kate did her guest editing of Huffington Post, which we've talked about before. Basically, they all worked from one of her rooms in Kensington Palace, and then she went out to go shopping after lunch. But this was the year that Kate had the highest number of engagements since joining the royal family, but it was still absolutely abysmal. And there were some notable omissions, like she skipped the sort of Paddy's Day traditional photos with the Irish Guards because she said she wanted to spend more time with her kids, which people were very pissed off about. She also skipped a big fundraiser for one of her patronages each and sent a letter instead, which people were unhappy about. And then on top of that, they spent Christmas in Bucklebury, so you didn't get those church walk photos that people like so much to kind of appease the unhappy fans. So this was not a great year for Will and Kate. This was also the year that Meghan Markle came on the scene. So Meghan arrived at a time when Kate and Will were having a bit of image trouble.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely makes sense, you know, all of this having happened, that perhaps they were especially concerned with their public image and what that, you know, meant for them going forward. Yeah.
This is a story I actually don't think we've talked about on the podcast before, but which I would have been losing my mind about if it happened now. I actually remember it happening at the time and just, like, absolutely being obsessed with it. 2017, March, photos surfaced showing Will at a Swiss club during a ski trip. Here's the headline from The Sun's exclusive story. Prince William dirty dances with two beauties, gyrates as model slut drops, and puts hand on woman's waist in new embarrassing footage during lad's ski holiday.
It's like you wrote your ideal headline.
One clubber said he looked worse for wear and was dancing so wildly that I did a double take when I first saw him and thought it must be a look-alike. This clubber said it was proper dad dancing and that they just had to film it, which they kindly did and then passed on to the Sun. So we've all seen it and never forget it because it's absolutely incredible.
It's amazing. And I actually now have had the idea of hiring a Will lookalike to dance wildly in a club as soon as they reopen. Because that is so funny.
He was dancing to I Got 5 on it. And also, according to The Sun, he apparently requested that the DJ play Pump Up the Volume.
Oh my god.
And you can't turn down a Prince, can you?
No, you can't say no requests. This was the same day as the Queen's Commonwealth Service, which he had skipped to go on this trip.
Stunning.
He was the only senior royal not to attend. And he was also photographed drinking rosé at brunch with the girls, these two beauties, before reportedly having Jaeger bombs with them.
I can't get over this. And at this point in the year, which was mid-March, he had done 13 days of work. This was a particularly bad look for work-shy Will. But then later that week, same week, Kate and Will embarked on the first part of the Great Brexit Charm Offensive of 2017, which started with a visit to Paris. Then later Kate did a solo trip to Luxembourg. They went on a tour of Poland and Germany, and then they also visited Belgium. So they were really sent off around Europe. This year also saw Will leave the air ambulance to take up royal duties full time, following the retirement of Prince Philip and George being at school in London. But it struck me that this was clearly the start of Will and Kate as the UK's sort of secret Brexit weapon, and that the government was really harnessing their soft power as a diplomatic resource, which they still do, which they're going to continue to do.
I mean, that still is the main
function of the royals.
Yeah. I just like that he had to leave his job in order to take this up full time. He just wouldn't have had the time otherwise. But apparently he left the air ambulance service because, according to him, he wasn't allowed to do royal duties on his rest days from the air ambulance. But then they had a spokesperson from the air ambulance who was like, oh, no, he can do that. I think they're mistaken. So funny.
Just before we move on, while we mentioned the Poland tour, I really noticed this year that Kate had a sort of mini makeover in her style, that she started dressing like her age, basically. Like, I really loved the outfits on the Poland tour, especially the Gosia Baczynska dress with the kind of edgy pleats. I know that was quite a divisive one, but I really liked it. And I was very into the Gucci dress she wore at the V&A and the printed Prada dress she wore at the Diana event in the Sunken Garden at Kensington Palace. But I know another big highlight from this year for people was Will, Kate and Harry's relay race for Heads Together, which had launched the year before, but really got underway in 2017, and people loved those photos.
Yeah.
Which we actually saw more recently in Kensington Palace's Instagram post on Harry's birthday last year.
And was subjected to a fresh round of analysis. But 2018, Kate was on maternity leave for most of the year, but before she went, we saw the Cambridge's tour of Stockholm, during which Will beat former hockey captain Kate in a game of bandy hockey.
And Kate wore that infamous mustard floral dress by Erdem, which I think is in the sort of Hall of Fame of her very worst looks. I didn't mind it as much as other people did. I like when she does something different. And I was delighted that Erdem really redeemed himself later that year when she wore that stunning, like one of my favourite Kate outfits ever, the gorgeous tweed dress at the V&A with a sort of asymmetric neckline. They also attended the BAFTAs. 2018 was the year of the Time's Up red carpet protest, and Kate opted not to participate, something we've talked about many times. We were very disappointed that she wore that dark green dress. And we also saw the Fab Four, Will, Kate, Harry and Meghan interacting for the first time publicly at the Royal Foundation Forum. People really got excited over that.
Yeah. And then we saw them again as a foursome at Harry and Meghan's wedding when Kate wore a cream dress. And I would just say it was a white dress.
The big story of 2018 for Kate and Will, though, was the birth of Louis. And Kate's fastest hospital photo turnaround, less than 7 hours after giving birth.
She was out there quick as you like.
But we were delighted. We love little bloke Louis.
Yeah, especially when he was a really little bloke. He was so funny. 2019, obviously a very important year because that was the birth of Airheads.
It was also the year of Kate's gardens.
This was very much her garden era. And actually, having looked back over these years, she never seems to have done anything to do with gardens before 2019.
Yes, she has. She's done lots of gardening related things. She's done lots of tree planting. She's done planting events with kids. But this was the first time she designed her own garden.
And it really became part of her identity.
Yeah. It was a huge theme of 2019.
Maybe something that didn't or shouldn't have had a place in these gardens was Will's rose bush. A thorn in the Cambridge's side.
This was when affair rumours involving Prince William and Rose Hambury, the Marchioness of Cholmondeley, began to circulate. We've talked about these so many times on this podcast.
Yeah.
I don't want to get into it again. But you can go back and listen to our numerous episodes about this.
Yeah. We also had the Mary Berry Christmas special with Kate apparently shrugging Will's hand off her shoulder. That was another thing that lots of people wanted us to talk about. But we did talk about it at the time because we were very surprised that it made the edit.
Yeah, hugely surprised. There were lots of Cambridge family moments that year. Things we talked about in the podcast, but we can just mention again. The boat race on the Isle of Wight when Charlotte stuck her tongue out and stole the show.
Oh yeah, everyone loved that.
Yeah, it was great.
It was good.
Charlotte's first day of school photos. You may remember that Kate couldn't attend George's first day because she was so ill with morning sickness, but she more than made up for it with this appearance. These incredible photos of the four of them where she looks unbelievable. The Aston Villa match when George was going crazy. Another good moment. And George and Charlotte attending the Christmas church walk in Sandringham for the first time.
Yeah.
Something we didn't like.
No, well, we felt they were starting royal duties very early, but I actually had forgotten that they put George to work on these tours from a very young age.
For Will and Kate alone, though, there was also the Pakistan tour, which was hugely successful, as we talked about at the time. Kate seemed to have learned the lessons of the India tour, certainly with her wardrobe, was much more considerate. Lots of local designers and traditional garments. And, of course, Will's big fashion moment in the Sherwani.
Yeah, his only fashion moment ever.
But it was a great one.
Yeah, it was really good. We had some really good engagements on that tour, like Kate's portraits that she took, and when they went back to the children's charity that they had missed because their kind of plans were derailed by a storm. Oh, and they visited the mosque that Diana had visited when she was there in 1991.
Yeah, so that was a very well done tour and really well received, which they needed, honestly.
Yeah.
And more tours to 2020.
Yeah.
The tour in Ireland, probably most memorable now for Will's bad coronavirus joke and Kate's Irish flag cosplay.
It was fairly well received other than that.
The Commonwealth service with Harry and Meghan, where they were very frosty, very bad look for Will and Kate.
Yeah.
And then lockdown.
Embracing Zoom with gusto.
The family clap for carers.
Yeah, that was such a big moment for them. Almost as big as the disastrous Royal Train Tour. And probably the worst offence of all was, for me, Will's secret COVID.
Yeah.
Which
everyone's forgotten about, but we will not.
Always remember Will's lying to us about that.
And yeah, since then, They have been further embroiled in the aftermath of Harry and Meghan leaving the family and their Oprah interview. So I think they're in a sort of rocky space again now. And I feel like everything they do is so weighted and so loaded. Like even this week when they had that engagement with the sheep, where it was just like, oh, totally harmless, like sporty, cute little day out, and the whole time you were thinking, okay, and how does this respond to Philip's death and to the Queen taking it more of a backseat in Charles's shadow regency and Harry and Meghan's claims in the Oprah interviews. Like, you're constantly reading it in this context, so it'll be really interesting to see going forward what Kane will do.
Their job is going to be made so much easier with a new yacht, I think. They'll be able to see loads more sheep.
Another throwback, though, before we conclude. Quote of the week comes from harpist Claire Jones, who spoke to People magazine about her experience playing at the royal wedding reception in 2011 and the moment Will came up to thank her. She recalled, "The first thing he said to me was, 'Did you hear what I said in my speech?' I said I did, but I asked him to remind me because I hadn't heard it all. He said, 'Thank goodness Claire turned up to play the harp because otherwise we'd have to get my brother to play it instead.' He thought that was hilarious." Oh my god, I love this woman.
So funny, and I just couldn't believe anything more. That Will is the kind of person who loves to repeat his jokes and make sure you find them just as funny as he does.
Before he even thanked her, he was like, "Did you hear my great joke? Let me do it again." And then laughing hysterically at his own joke.
So good.
Amazing.
Maybe I do find a kinship with him after all. But Fit for a Queen comes from this week. It's Kate's ghost dress that she was wearing in the new photos they released to mark their 10th wedding anniversary.
I love this dress. She's had a lot of good ghost dresses. She was wearing a ghost dress in the Clap for Carers as well. But she had previously worn this to a private event during the Pakistan tour in 2019, which we'd only seen in unofficial photos. So it was great to see this in its full glory. A wrap dress, pale blue, with 3 different floral prints. Quite daring of Kate. Clashing prints.
I would hardly call them clashing, if I'm honest. They were just different. But yeah, it seems like very much kind of Kate's signature style now is these kind of dresses, and you see it in the tiered frills on the sleeve and on the skirt and stuff. It's very instantly recognisable now as like a Kate look.
Yeah, and I just thought her hair looked so good. Like, they've really figured out a blowout that suits her, that doesn't look as so over the top as those big bouncy sausage curls that she had for so many years. Yeah. She just looked amazing. And she was wearing a new diamond necklace that cost like £12,000 or something, like a real whopper of a diamond going on there. But yeah, she looks fantastic. And I think I would say Kate is first in line this week.
Yeah, and I agree. I think, it's hard for anyone, but especially women, to be in a situation where everyone's comparing them to what they were like 10 years ago. Yeah,
definitely. And I think, of course, we always want Kate and the Cambridges to do more, to work more. But I think looking back, and particularly looking at the wedding, you do see what people mean when they say she's grown into her role. Like, she does seem more confident and less nervous.
Yeah.
And more sure of herself. And I think she comes out looking great.
Yeah, no, I agree. Next week, looking to the future now, we've got on Saturday the 8th, Harry and Meghan will appear as campaign chairs at a global citizen concert called Vax Live, alongside Selena Gomez, J-Lo, and the Foo Fighters. It's all about aiming to increase access to COVID vaccines.
Yeah, I'm really interested in how this is going to work. I presume they'll just have like a pre-recorded message that they'll talk about the importance of access to vaccines. And...
a pre-recorded song with the Foo Fighters. yeah, no, I think so. Yeah.
But yeah, that's going on next weekend. We will see what everyone else is up to. We have been working on something that we wanted to share.
Yeah, we've been working on some merch. So we have done a series of t-shirts that we are looking to make available soon. And we're thinking we might do some mugs and stuff as well, which could be fun.
Yeah, so look out for those. We will post about them on social media and on our website.
Yeah, I'm very excited to share that with everyone.
Yes, Tom's beautiful designs. Thank you so much for listening. Let us know if there are any Will and Kate moments that we missed that you guys find particularly fun or funny.
Yeah, and in the meantime, have a fantastic week.
See you next time. Bye.
Bye.
There's a story that goes the rounds that you had a picture of him on your wall as a
There
child.
wasn't just one, there was like 10, 20.
He wishes, no. No, I had the Levi's guy on my wall, not a picture of William, sorry. Sorry.
It was me and Levi's, honestly. Yeah.